Author Kat Richardson's heroine, private investigator Harper Blaine, is no stranger to Seattle's dark side. In my interview with Kat, I asked her about Seattle's creepy and cool underground.
Usually I tell people that I write paranormal detective novels, because if you say urban fantasy, a lot of them have no idea what it is, in spite of the fact that it's a very hot genre. There's also kind of this perception that urban fantasy and paranormal romance are virtually interchangeable, and I don't think that they are. Paranormal fiction to me involves anything which is in that unseeable side lane of what might be natural or normal, but we just don't see it. You know, that corner of the eye sensation, the ghosts and magic. When I was a kid, this goes way back, there was a British television series, and it was marketed in the United States as My Partner the Ghost, but it was called Randall and Hopkirk Deceased in England, and it ran in the early 70s. It was about these two private investigators in London. One of them gets killed in a car accident, and so his ghost comes back to haunt his partner and tells him to solve his murder. It's not an accident. And then he won't go away. And so the rest of the series was this guy who's really kind of shady, being haunted by the ghost of his partner, who was a real straight arrow, urging him to solve all these problems that he encounters as a ghost. And I thought that was an interesting idea, ghost as detective. And, ghost with problems needs a detective. But I didn't know what else to do with it. And then eventually I was thinking about this idea in physics of higher energy states. And I thought, well, what if ghosts are a higher energy state? And, so you jump up into that, and now you're talking to them. So then I had this physics idea, and I had this television series idea with a hard-boiled detective, and I kind of squished them together. We moved up here in 1993, and Seattle was experiencing some very unusual weather that created ground fog that sat just a couple of feet above the ground. And so you would see things moving around under the fog level, see people's feet, dogs and cats, but you couldn't see anything higher than that. And it created a very strange effect. And I thought, that's what this is like. It's like being in the fog. You can only see some things, and the light falls on them strangely. And so all those things kind of came together. So a combination of this television series, these ideas about physics, the fog, and the fact that I did read a lot of hard-boiled detective novels when I was a kid. So I squished that all together, and that's how I came up with this idea. Harper Blaine is the protagonist. She's a private investigator. She lives here in Seattle, and she starts the series as a very ordinary person who believes that she lives in a completely logical, ordinary world, and that she has control of her life and her world. And then she dies for 2 minutes after being beaten by a guy she's investigating. And when she wakes up in the hospital, she can see ghosts and monsters. And the gray is this kind of interference fringe between the normal world and the paranormal world, and that's what she's experiencing. She's able to physically encounter it, enter it, and interact with it. Part of the theory that I operated on when developing this was that the gray is something most people don't see. It's there, you just don't have the extra little filter to see it, or maybe you have too many filters and therefore you don't see it. But she ain't got that anymore, so she's stuck with it. Unfortunately, when she can see monsters, they can see her. And the original premise was, if you're stuck someplace where you can't address your own problems, you have to have someone to address them for you. So as a private investigator, she becomes the private investigator to ghost monsters, vampires, werewolves, vampires and witches and so on, bring their problems to her when they can't resolve them themselves. And so that was where the series started, was with this idea of the in-between creatures having a liaison to solve their problems, and that's Harper. Setting the book in Seattle was a natural thing, and I think that's where I had difficulty making the story work before, because living and working in Los Angeles, which is where I moved to Seattle from, there just wasn't that sense of the constantly impending creepiness. Los Angeles is very sunny, even in the worst possible weather, except, the few times of year when it rains like mad. And it didn't seem like a place that you would just come around a corner and find a ghost. Seattle has that feeling that there's something strange lurking around every corner. If you could just catch that thing that you saw out of the corner of your eye, you would see it. And so, yeah, Seattle sort of demanded that this is the place. Maybe if I'd moved to Portland, I would have said it there, but I didn't. So it's Seattle. When they built the original city, it was a mud flat, and it used to get really mucky every high tide. Water would come back in, the streets would turn into mud. Children literally drowned in sinkholes. It was awful. But it makes great stuff when you're working with ghosts. And so when the city burned down, they said, oh, we have this great opportunity to rebuild the city a little higher. They raised the streets, they built these really tall buildings with the intention of raising the sidewalk levels, but it took them quite a long time. And once they'd covered it over, they had all these basements that people had been using as the main doors, except now they were down below the street. And they continued to use them for many, many years until they became too dangerous, and then they condemned it. So this was this wonderful inspiration of this creepy place that's still there, even though it's kind of locked up now, and a lot of it's been renovated. And I thought, what a great place to have a monster, someplace that's there, but is kind of hidden, and most people ignore it. So this great idea of history that's reachable, but is something you don't bother to look at, that's full of your past and your horrors, was just fantastic. And so I grabbed a hold of that and used it with a lot of help.
When friends don't stop friends from eating friends, friends die. Friends don't let friends eat friends.